moving on to our next session in the program. After the pandemic, it's time to get serious and credible. Ladies and gentlemen, with us right now is the chairman of the ROI Institute from the United States, Dr. Jack Phillips. Dr. Jack, the mic is yours.
Well, thank you. And it's good to be here with you. I've had the opportunity to be with this group now for 3 times as a keynote. So I'm very honored to be a part of this group and particularly talk about this topic. I want to connect with the other keynotes on some of their points here. In our session, we're designing virtual for impact and ROI. And the key thing that we want to do is make sure that we get serious with it and that we are credible. Dr. Gotham points out that when we look at data and we analyze data, credibility is the key issue. That was my message from his talk. And Johnny just described how much a virtual will be an important part of the future, and upskilling is an important part of the future, and talent development is so much part of the future. Learning and development is a big part of what we'll be doing. But yet it's got to work, and that's a key message here. Does it really work when we switch it to virtual? And we say it can, but often it's not. So we have to get serious with that. And I'm going to borrow some things from Dave Aldrich, the first keynote, and look at what can we do to make it work for us. So that's the issue. So here we are with all of the learning and development organizations around the world. So our focus obviously is concerned about learning, and we flipped everything virtual. So is it working? That's the key word here, key issues. Here's the 3 things we want to cover in this brief conversation. One is to let you know very clearly that we've underinvested in this concept of showing the value. We call that measurement and evaluation sometimes. We haven't invested as much as we need to, and it shows. Second, we want to look at what do executives want us to do? What do they want us to show in terms of value? And it's no secret. They want the business connection. We'll show you some more details on that. And then let's think about how do we get there? So if you want results at the end, you have to start with those results. We heard that from Stephen Covey many years ago. We call it sometimes start with why, with the business measure. Our partner in Australia likes to use the term start where you want to finish. The finish these days is not just that they've learned, but that they actually have used what they've learned and have an impact. We'll get into that in some detail here. But first, let's think about some challenges we faced for a long time. And they're often irritating challenges. So I want you to look at these statements here. There are 5 statements on the screen. As you look at these statements, think about what you've seen and what you've faced. Would you say that they're mostly true or mostly false as you look at this statement? And I want to tell you what we typically see from others who take this as a poll in a webinar or a conference. So take the first one. Most of learning and development is wasted. That means that they don't actually use what they've learned. Is that mostly true? Mostly false? What do you think? Unfortunately, they tell us it's mostly true. And in fact, about 70 to 80% is where we see this number. It's improving a little bit, but not enough. So what our own team is telling us, the people who provide learning and development, we know they don't use this stuff. That's horrible. Okay, now go to number 2. The learning outcome desired by executives is rarely measured in our organization. What do you think? Mostly true, mostly false? Unfortunately, they tell us mostly true. In fact, about 90% is a typical number there, saying that's true. Ooh, that hurts. Now, let's go to the third one. Most learning providers, and that's us, do not have data that shows that we make a difference in the organization. To make a difference, it means they have to use what they've learned, and there's a corresponding impact. That's a difference maker. So What do you think? Mostly true? We don't have that data? Mostly false? What do you think? Well, unfortunately, our polls show us about 80% saying that's true, mostly true. That's tough. Think about that for a minute. And then most executives see learning as a cost and not an investment. Is that mostly true or false from your perspective, what you've seen? Sadly, most of our respondents in our polls say, that's about 95% say that's true. You know what happens when it's a cost. Executives will control it, pause it, freeze it, eliminate it. That's what they do when it's a cost. But if it's an investment, hey, they may protect it. They may enhance it, may support it, give us more maybe. So we've really got to work on that. And then the last one, executives view hard skills as more valuable than soft skills. What do you think? Mostly true, mostly false? Again, the data says that's also true. 70% is about where it is. So it doesn't matter whether it's hard or soft with virtual, but you can see the challenge here is to move a lot of what we do to the soft skills. Johnny was telling us that. And we have to see that soft skills are really more important. And some executives intuitively think that, but they don't have good evidence showing that. So now let's just flip this. That's L&D overall. You can see there's some serious challenges here. Challenges that have been with us for some time. We're getting better, but we're still not where we need to be. Here's the reality. All of these should be false, mostly false on every one of those. And the virtual, if we ask the same question with the people who manage and run virtual programs, the percent saying true is even worse. So we got work to do here. We have work to do to show the value of what we do. So here's the process. Here's what's happening. In reality, any project or any program that we implement in learning, in HR, even in technology, it doesn't matter. You've got a logical flow of data, a logic chain. That's the basis for a lot of evaluation models. It's certainly the basis for ours. We trace that back about almost 200 years ago in its first use. It's been around a long time. It's a logic flow of data. And we've seen this before. You see, we have input into our virtual, input in our programs. That's who's coming and how long they'll be with us and the cost of that. Level 0, it's input, not outcomes. We sometimes get mistaken and we call that contribution. It's not contribution. It's just input. And then we measure reaction. Yes, we want to do that. But what's important is things like, is it relevant to your work? Is it important to your success? Is it something that you would use? Is it something that you would recommend? See, that's a powerful reaction. And that's what we want, because those kinds of reactions often correlate with application, which is coming up in just a minute. It's a good predictor of people using the learning. Hey, that's important because it becomes a predictor then. And then learning. Hey, we're quite good at measuring learning. We know how to do that, all kinds of ways. We're measuring knowledge and skills. That's what we need to know. We need to know if they've learned, because the way the model works, if they don't learn, there won't be any application from that learning. Application is next. That's using what they've learned. We all know that, applying it. But that's where it typically breaks down. They just don't use it. And see, when we say in that first true false question that most of our learning is wasted, that means they don't use it. Even we recognize that. We call that scrap learning. And you see studies showing, 60, 70% of our learning is scrap learning because it's not used. What a waste. But see, after application, which is so important here, that's getting people to do something, comes the business impact. That's a consequence of application. They're using it now. Impact. After they've used it, there's a consequence, and that's the impact. The good news there, that's usually a measure in the system somewhere. It's a measure in our business or governments or wherever we are. They're measures of output, quality, cost, and time. And those break down into hundreds of measures that are out there. And you see some of those on the screen. That's the measures we need. That's the business connection to learning. But then there's another one. Is it worth it? Is it worth it to spend money on this? Money and time. Time is in here as well because that's money. Is it worth it to do that? And that's the ROI. Is it worth it? Do the monetary benefits of this equal the cost, or is it more than the cost? If it's more than the cost, it's a positive ROI. Now we calculate ROI using a couple of measures we're going to show you in a few minutes. But I want to just digress for a minute and look at something. I'm going to go back here and point out something. Level 3 is where this normally breaks down. Level 3. But executives want to see level 4 and 5. And I want to underscore that with a lot of research. Here's 3 researches. I'm going to put this one up first here, or just talk about this. This is some research that we did for ATD, Association for Talent Development. In that study with 96 Fortune 500 CEOs, the number one measure they wanted to see was impact. 96% of these executives wanted to see impact. That's a business connection. 74% of them wanted to see ROI. That's amazing. That's what they want from learning and development. You can see why so many of us said, we don't really provide that. We don't really measure that. That's a problem. Let's look at that ROI calculation. So what we use is the 2 most common ROI calculations on the planet. One of those is benefit cost ratio. Benefit cost ratio comes out of governments. It's the monetary benefits of the program or project divided by cost. That's been there for centuries, many centuries, almost 1,000 years now. It's been used by governments. So it's been there a long time. Then we use ROI that's in businesses, in the finance and accounting text, but it's been around a couple of 100 years. It's benefits minus the cost divided by cost times 100. So we put a percent on that. So if we have 30% ROI, that means for every dollar we invest, we get our dollar back plus 30 cents more. So those are 2 measures that are often considered to be elusive, but they shouldn't be. For our major programs, we should think about that, maybe push it to that level. So now, here's an example. If you have your calculator, you could do this yourself. If you had a program that costs $425,000, has benefits of 750 monetary benefits, the BCR you can see is 1.76. 1.76 to 1. We say for every $1 we invest, we get $1.76 in benefits. That's what we mean by benefit cost ratio. ROI now is benefits minus the cost. That's net. That's really how much we made off of this. In the finance and accounting literature, that's earnings. Even if our benefits that we are claiming are cost avoidance, if you're in government, and many of you are, that's what we have. We're avoiding a cost. We don't have profits, but we can save costs, prevent costs, avoid cost. That's what we're doing. And we spend $420,000 to get there. So that's the benefits net that we have divided by our costs times 100. That's 76%. That says that every $1 we invest, we get 76. We get our dollar return plus 76 cents. So that's the 2 ROI calculations. How do we get there? We got to get to the benefits. We got to get to impact. The monetary value comes from the impact. And I should go back there for just a minute. The mystery is this part. And we want to look at how do we get there? It's following the chain of value. As they react, they learn, they apply, and they have impact. We sort out the effects of the impact from other influences and convert that to money. That's where we get to the impact. Now let's look at what we have here. In virtual, we asked this question: can virtual learning be as effective as face-to-face learning? We asked these questions: yes, no, or maybe. What do you think? We have some pretty stiff opinions here that people tell us. In our own work, we're getting something that may surprise you. For no, we're getting around 20%. So 20% of our audience says it can't be. Another 30% says yes, but a big 50% say maybe. A lot of maybe here. And we'd say, yes, it can, but it has to be designed with that in mind. You see, when we look at comparing, and I have to say we've been operating for over 25 years now, so we've seen literally thousands of studies and have been involved in them in some way. When we try parallel comparisons of classroom versus learning, and we've done that many times, what we typically see is you get more impact and ROI from the classroom sessions than the virtual. Why? I think we know some reasons, but let's review that. Doesn't have to be, but it's there. Here's the reasons virtual breaks down. You know it, you see it. And the big one is multitasking, because in virtual learning, it's so easy and we know it. We fight it every day. All of our work is virtual. We see it and we deal with this. Multitasking, which we think we're so good at, it just doesn't work. It inhibits learning. You can imagine, think of the chain of value. You inhibit learning, you're inhibiting application. You inhibit application, you're inhibiting impact. You're inhibiting impact, you're inhibiting ROI. So that's where, there you go. And then the management support is usually missing in virtual, not so much in a live face-to-face program. You see, we know from research, and you know it too, the most important person to influence application and impact, level 3, level 4, is the manager of that person. We know they can make a difference by setting expectations in the beginning and following up with that person. They're more likely to do it if they're going to going to a classroom program, because they leave the facility, maybe they go, maybe travel, they're gone, they're missing, it's obvious. But in virtual, the manager may not even know they're involved in the program. So we often omit that. Not purposely, but unintentionally, we leave it out. And it's tied into the next one. Virtual learning, for the most part, is designed for learning, not impact. Go look at all of the virtual design books that are out there, and there are many of them. How do you design for virtual? It's all about that learning that takes place. We want them engaged and involved. Yes, we need that. But if they don't ever use it, it's all wasted anyway. That's what we're saying. We got to shift our focus here and start designing for level 3 and level 4, application and impact. It's missing now, and should not be missing. It's got left out. And the facilitator, a great facilitator, can make a difference. A live facilitator, we've kind of hinted at that today in some of our session. It makes a difference. They can bond with that facilitator, and that can make a difference. Technology breaks down. We see it almost every day in our work. Somewhere along the way, people get left out or get disconnected for a while. So we do have the technology issue, but it doesn't have to be that way. What can we do? What we can do is design virtual learning to deliver positive ROI. That means that we design it for application and impact, so that we've got the positive ROI. So we're going to flip this around a little bit. We're going to start with why. You see, Dr. Gotham made a great comment. It says, we need linear data, but we need nonlinear thinking. I would agree. So we need that linear data. If you think of the chain of value, from reaction to learning to application to impact to ROI. See, that's linearly how it takes place, but we are working all the way through this to make changes and adjustment. But now let's flip it around and say, why don't we start with that business measure in the beginning? This is a big shift for us in virtual. We want to make sure our virtual program is connected to the business. And you can do that. It takes conversation, maybe sometimes a little analysis, but usually we can get there with some conversations and understanding the situation. Start with why, a clear business measure. But let's make sure that this is the right solution. Hey, that's been a problem for us a long time, but for virtual, it's really more critical. Can I really move that business measure that you've described that we want to improve? Can I really move that with learning? And more particularly, can I move it with virtual learning? If the answer is no, then this is not the right solution to change that business measure that we thought we would change. So we have some conversations here. We do some checking here to make sure it's the right solution. Then we expect success. This is very powerful. One of the things that Dave Aldrich mentioned was regulate expectations. If you remember that from the first presentation. We want to regulate the expectations. We put objectives in place at level 1, reaction, level 2, learning. We're quite good at that. Level 3 for application, objectives, defining what we want people to do. And then level 4, impact. Now you got all of those objectives. We're going to give that to the whole team of stakeholders now, and they design for the success that we want. Now we've got impact in mind. We've got impact as our success measure. Why? Because that's where our funders want us to be. It's essentially this: if our learning doesn't, if it's not used on the job and have a corresponding impact, executive says it didn't work. And we might argue all day long, but we know they learned. But if they didn't use what they've learned, it still comes back to us because we got the funds for it. We're the ones who created that program. So we've got to work on this issue. Hey, we've been doing it for years. That's a classic transfer of learning. But we seem to forget that when we think about virtual. It's even more important now with virtual. We got to go there. And you design for it. You knowing that you got to get to impact, you put in tools and templates and processes in place. You make sure that people are putting job aids and application guides. We're using technology. We're using all of that creative energy that we have for developing good learning. Let's move it now to application and impact so that we're now getting something done, getting something completed, something initiated after they leave. We got to do that. Now there's a document here. I want to make sure you get this document. It's 30 techniques to design for virtual and for application and impact from virtual programs. It will be on our resources, but remember, to get to the resources here, you have to fill out the evaluation form, then you have resources. We'll also show you an application guide that describes this methodology we have to measure the success. That will be in the handouts as well as the slides here. But you got to give us some feedback on the evaluation. Then after we've got the data, we've designed for the data here. That gives us a good chance that we're going to have success now at level 3, level 4. Now we're going to do sampling. You remember Dave says, let's sample, we're going to experiment nimbly. So we do some sampling here. We're running a little experiment here to see how well this is working. When we get to the impact, we're going to sort out the effects of our program, our virtual program, from other influences. That's on to analyze the data. We're going to then convert that to money, bring in the cost of the program, and that will be an ROI calculation following the formula that we just talked about. Then we've got a great story to tell. But our story now has numbers and narrative. We got great stories because we have level 1 data that tells us how they reacted to it. Level 2 data says what they've learned. Level 3 now is what they've done with what they've learned. And level 4 is the impact it have. They often tell us stories because when we collect data, we have room for that in the comments from questionnaires, or we have interviews where we're capturing the data. So we've got great stories, but now we've got data. We got reaction, learning, application, impact, and even ROI, if we want to take it there. It's a more of a story now to get to this. So we're basically designing for what we want. When we do that, we've got this involved. We've got the best way to protect your budget. So if you envision the future, we need to make sure we protect our budgets. We saw this in the last recession, something interesting. We all were there. A lot of us flipped into virtual because with recession, we didn't have money, people couldn't travel. Executive says, hey, this is great, convert everything to learning. I like this because there's no travel, there's no building, there's no facilitators. This is great, it's cheap. And we quickly, hurriedly converted things to virtual. But after the recession was over, even executives could see it's not working. And that's when he said, Let's don't do that. If it's important, don't put it on e-learning or mobile learning. That's a quote from a top executive. If it's important, we don't want to put it through that medium. So that's horrible. Let's don't let that happen to us this time. We know virtual is going to be a part of what we do. Blended learning is going to be where we are with most going forward, but we got to look at virtual. We got to make it work. And it's a way to protect our budgets and defend our budgets and get the funding that we might need in the future. And then we connect our projects to the business. That's what executives want us to do, connecting what we do to the business. And we show the contribution of direct projects, selected projects. Now, we won't be very selective here. Only projects that are very expensive, very strategic, maybe very important, maybe solving some problem we have or taking advantage of a huge opportunity. Those kind of projects are the ones we'd push to this level. And it's those that would attract the executive attention. Those all go together, you can see. And so it builds our respect for this group now. Hey, they see we can do this. Now you've got data that they appreciate, connecting to the business, and they see what's actually improved. And they see the ROI. That's the efficient use of the fund. We're investing this much money and we see what we're getting out. That's their best way to compare. ROI is a way to keep score, according to Warren Buffett and his definition of ROI and its use. But we build morale of the team. Hey, we all want to know that we connected to the business. It's a good team builder. When our early use of this, we were doing this because our own team liked to know that they made a difference in the organization. They connected to the business. You don't look at it as a burden anymore or a cost anymore. It's an investment because we've got great data showing that. And that's what we need. Hey, we get more support then. And we can use it to make our programs better. And we can eliminate those programs that are the wrong programs. They're just not adding value and they won't add value. That's rare, but it happens. We can get there. So here's the issue. When it comes to delivering results from our virtual learning, just remember that hope is not a strategy, luck is not a factor, and doing nothing is not an option. Things have changed. Our work has changed. Our way of learning has changed. And also the accountability for that learning has shifted. No longer is we judge our learning programs based on the fact that learning has occurred. If it's a major program, you've got to have business data, impact data that shows how it works. That gets us where we need to be. Change is inevitable. Progress is optional. Now, I want to connect this to what Dave said this morning. He says, he had a strategy for harnessing uncertain times, 5 principles. One of those was envision the future. Envision the future. We have, and we do. We've seen it before from recessions. Well, it'd be more difficult to get our budgets approved. Funding is going to be more difficult. And there would be more questions about the value of what we do. We see it coming. We've already had it. So envision that future that we'll have to live in and work with, showing the value of what we do, particularly if it's a large expenditure. And then regulate expectations. That is, you create the expectations. Get in there and do that now. Don't wait for someone to push this level of evaluation. You take charge of the process yourself. You drive the evaluation bus. Don't let someone else drive it for you. You wait for the requests. You got 3 things working against you. Number 1 is that you have a short timeline to give someone some data, ROI data, for example. And number 2, you're defensive because you've been asked to do that. You're defending a program. And number 3, ROI is on someone else's agenda. You want to keep it on your agenda. Drive this thing yourself. That's regulating your expectations, as Dave mentioned this morning. And then tame apprehensions. Hey, this is an area you haven't evaluated. You say, I don't know how to do that. That's going to take a lot of math, isn't it? No, we can keep it to 4th grade math. That means I have to know a lot about finance and accounting. No, this is an easy formula. Easy. It's a formula that we actually see in 4th grade math. So it's not that difficult. Try to tame those apprehensions. And then experiment nimbly. Experiment nimbly. Try some things. Try and see how it's working. Make adjustments. If it doesn't, there's a good chance that the first time, maybe it doesn't. Change it. Make it better next time. and then collaborate frequently. Share this with the whole team. Remember, by designing for the virtual learning to deliver application impact and ROI, we're involving the whole team. So we're collaborating with them, and we have to collaborate with our client. So we collaborate frequently. So we'll take Dave's comments on the first keynote, and that summarizes what we're doing here. Now we do have a study. We've got those 30 ways to design, but we'd like to show you a virtual ROI project that is a virtual program. We'll take one, mobile learning, and show you how it's designed and delivers. All of the data we're talking about include a very positive ROI. We'd like to send that to you, and you can just pop a note to Melissa on our team, and she can get that to you. And there's more tools. I just mentioned this. You can go to our website and look at ROI Institute Academy and go to the level 0 membership. And you got a lot of tools there in addition to what we're providing you in the conference here. So I think we'll stop there now, and I think we may have time for a question if we have any questions in the chat box.
Yes, sir. I guess we have some questions, but sir, before you even go on to the questions, I just want to say how much we do appreciate you and all the research, the talks, the books you wrote. And it is such an honor and a pleasure to know that we are right now in the presence of a legend like yourself, sir. So I just want to appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here. I'm honored to be here.
The honor is all ours, sir. So I guess now we have some questions. So maybe we're going to start from the bottom. We have Mr. Rajab saying that was the importance of L&D design?
I'm sorry, the first part of that was what?
The importance of L&D design.
Yes. You see, that's a good question, because what we're saying, if you just go to someone's L&D program that's been implemented and we start collecting data after it's been implemented, we often see some disappointing results. In fact, usually about half of those are negative. Disappointing for the team. The problem was it wasn't designed to deliver impact. It wasn't designed to get to application and impact and ROI. So you've got to design for whatever you need. That's a concept of design thinking. In design thinking, you set your goals to what measures are you trying to influence. Here, the key thing is impact. We want to make sure we have the right solution, and we expect success. And that expect success is defined in objectives. Now the whole team, all of the stakeholders, the instructional system designers, the program owners, the support team, even the managers of the stakeholders, the participants are involved now in doing their share to make it work. So we're designing for the results we want. So we have to step back here and say, we got to go back to the beginning and design for the success that we want. We start with why. As our partner in Australia said, and I mentioned earlier, we want to start where we want to finish. We want to finish with the impact. We got to start with it. Otherwise, we may not get there. And designing gets us there. That's why it's so important and so critical. It involves the whole team. We've got to collaborate with our whole team on this issue. We can't have just a person in evaluation trying to do this and change the whole team. You got to get everyone involved. How about another question?
Yes, sir, indeed. Thank you for the answer. Going on to the next question. It goes like this, by Firdaus Khan. She says, better workplaces, better world. A nice quote. How to incorporate safety culture to the organization to enhance better and safe workplace.
Yes. So obviously, we've got a culture issue here, and we got probably a learning issue here. Whatever program we're implementing, we have to think of this chain of value. We actually work with culture. We've worked with safety cultures. So that is, we want safety habits. See, what we want people doing is working safely. We want that, doing the things that are necessary to keep themselves safe and their colleagues safe. See, that's level 3 in this system. We want them to see our program or see our culture as something that's important to us, important to them, it's needed, it's necessary. And then learning what to do to make sure that we're operating safely. And then we actually operate safely. So level 3 is probably where our key evaluation. We probably want to stop there for many programs that may be pushing just safety. But we could go into level 4. We're preventing incidents and accidents, harm to people, harm to equipment, to the buildings, and to the environment as we look at level 4, the consequence. And then you can do certainly ROI. We work in the safety area. So any project or program you have, just think the chain of value. It's always there. As we react, we learn, we apply, we have impact, and there's an ROI there. Just think, every learning program you've ever been involved in your whole life had that value chain. We just don't know what the data may be because we didn't collect it. What we have to do now is collect some data, more data than we have, but we got to move down the value chain. Do we have time maybe for one more?
Well, one more question, if you don't mind, sir. Okay, we got another one by Umayma Al-Aradi. Most people multitask during their trainings, virtual or otherwise. How do we manage this issue?
Well, that's a challenge. First, I want you to, we need for people to realize that multitasking inhibits learning. If we've got learning involved and we want them to learn, we have to have them know that. There's an interesting book, it's called Single Tasking. That's the title of the book, Single Tasking. And it shows a lot of research of how multitasking doesn't work. We think we're good at it, but we don't. We don't do it very well. Now, obviously, we design for it, and this is where the ISD team is doing quite well. We're designing a lot of interaction, involvement, activities. As we do our virtuals, we have polling, we have breakout groups, we have whiteboards, we have quizzes, we have exercises. We're getting them involved. And the big thing that we see, and it's so critical, but controversial for some, is that we'd like to have them on camera, have them face to face. If they're off camera, it's inviting multitasking, and it happens. We've had people come to us and tell us that, look, I had my camera on. I didn't want it on, but I put it on because I know I'll learn a lot more. That's from a participant. We know that. The research shows that. So we've got to get them involved, engaged, so that they do learn. Because without the learning, there's no application. We got to get the learning, but let's don't lose sight of, even if they have the learning, there's still a chance that they won't use it. So we have to make sure we got tools and follow-up and processes in place for them to use it, to apply it and be successful with it. So we'd be happy to chat with you. We've got our contact information on the screen. We got lots of resources. If you need something from us, let us know. You'll have a lot of resources in your downloadables from this conference. And remember, you got to fill out the evaluation form first to get there. I think our time is up, but let us know if we can provide any more detail to you, or if you want to have some dialogue or conversation around this. We'd be happy to do that. Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity of being with you today.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Much appreciated, and our sincerest gratitude to your effort and to the session, as it was insightful, informative, and an eye-opener into many topics and aspects into the virtual learning and ROI. Thank you very much, Doctor. Much appreciated.